You sound great, thank you. I will be moving you into the virtual lobby before the meeting starts. It's kind of cameras live.
Thank you, Ms. Legault. I'd like to welcome you all to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, November the 18th. I would like to begin by acknowledging our presence and gathering in different places that are traditionally cared for and are the territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically Cowichan tribes. And we have an agenda that has been published. And I understand that from Ms. Legault, we don't have any additions or new information. Welcome, Alternate Director Hames. So I think we have a full slate of directors here. So we have an agenda that's been published. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as circulated? Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? See none opposed, the motion carries. On to item number 2, I'm actually going to carry some of the load for Ms. Legault because apparently she is going to be the person that will have to jump up and go and attend any issues around the early voting. So I'll just carry that burden for her in Area H because of the early voting. Go to M1, and it's the minutes of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of November the 4th, 2020 be adopted. Do we have a mover? Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? See none opposed, the motion carries. Next item, M2, that the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee, regular Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of November the 4th, 2020 be adopted. We have a mover, moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Salmon. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault, are you aware of any business arising from the minutes?
None.
Thank you. We now come to number 4, public input period. And Ms. Legault, are you aware of any items of public input concerning today's agenda?
I have 3. The first item, sorry, my pages are sticking together here. The first item is from Cliff Evans. On today's agenda is R4 with the soil deposit quarterly report. It's nice to see the report as it not only shows the public what's going on, but the contractors take a keen interest in it too. Good show in getting this report out. Speaking with the contractors, I hear that they have concerns over every dump truck and pup trailer is rated at 10 cubic meters per box. We know that this isn't the case, but it's easier for tallying the CVRD deposit fee. Contractors don't mind paying the fee per box, but they don't get value, as 1,000 cubic meters would equal 100 boxes in CVRD counting, but 100 boxes may only in fact be 800 cubic meters, so a contract for 1,000 cubic meters may get shortchanged. There are many more inequities, and the best persons to let us know what they are the people using the system. There are other problems over hydrology tests that need to be ratified. We all understand we have a new soil deposit bylaw and it is growing pains and needs to be reviewed. The public, contractors, drivers, and many others would like to have their input heard so this bylaw will reflect and accomplish our goals for clean potable water for all people and living things in our watershed. All interested citizens must be involved, informed, and have input to things happening in the CVRD, otherwise we'll just have a dictatorship. We must all stand up and protect our democracy. Many people sacrifice their lives for it. Let's not let them down. The next submission is from Bernard Yearlink, Mill Bay. Dear Chair, we are for, in the review of the soil deposit bylaw, there should be public input. The reason the public wanted a soil deposit bylaw was to ensure that the environment would be protected from landfilling operations. On Monday, the turbidity in Shawnigan Creek at the Souk Lake Road Bridge was 12.3 NTUs, while a ditch running into Shawnigan Creek at West Shawnigan Lake Road had a turbidity of 92.5 NTUs. This turbidity is due to landfilling operations, and associated with this turbidity are nutrients that enter Shawnigan Lake. Such nutrients promote the growth of Eurasian water milfoil algae as well as blue-green algae. Please ensure that the public has a say in the review of the soil deposit bylaw. And the third and final submission is from Susan Kaufman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'd like to provide comment on R7. In reading this report, I had a sense of deja vu, except for the DAPR Development Approval Process Report. The items identified are long-standing and unresolved issues within the CVRD. The difference this time is the CVRD authorized an approximately $30,000 contract that does not identify any new specific key items. Staff have provided a summary of the contracted work, but not the urban systems report. Why not? Attaching the DAPR would have given credence to the document. Was the DAPR report considered before contracting out? 5 key words emerge: communication, trust, collaboration, service, opportunities. Costs, but no budget except for land management system. Hiring of additional staff, additional technical support from external professionals, does not specifically address staff turnover, additional voluntary technical advisory committee, tie the emphasis of the importance of the development permits in the HOCP/MOCP. Advisory planning commissions are a great resource that include people with a great degree of commitment and expertise that are not utilized to their greatest potential. The recent resignation of an entire APC should be concerning and is a sign that greater attention and development of their role needs to be given to this dedicated group of volunteers. Despite emphasis of the public in the process, the CVRD has consistently reduced the opportunities for the public to engage in public input, question period, and public hearings by eliminating the Q&A, engage the APCs in service reviews. One of the key shortfalls of the urban systems and the staff reports was the failure or omission to include the public as key stakeholders. The DAPR report acknowledges the importance of the public in the context of the development approval process. The CVRD staff and elected officials work for and in the service of the public. This is sometimes lost in the greater scheme of things. To delegate or further delegate decision-making is to delegate your ability to represent your constituents to whom you serve. And that is the end of public input submissions.
Thank you, Ms. Legault. We have no delegations today. We go to correspondence, and that's number 6 in our agenda. And I will read the first item, C1, that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satellum, Glenora, in the amount of $3,000 be provided to the Cowichan Green community for the Garden Education Center. Turn to Director Nicholson. Would you move that recommendation? Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? No one opposed. The motion carries. Ms. Legault, do we know what date these are anticipated to go to the next board?
These will go to the November 25th board meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Legault. We have a couple of information items in number 7, the next item on our agenda. I see Director Acton raise her hand. Director Acton, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to pull number 2 and have that separate, please.
Okay, we can do that. These are just for information. So does anybody want to discuss the minutes from Electoral Area A or Electoral Area C? Fair enough. Director Acton, proceed on number 2.
Well, I would move to deny this as information because it's a raving review from the APC. The APC did not receive all the information from the applicant at that time, so I would prefer that it be referred back.
So you're moving that the minutes be referred back to the APC. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Any further discussion on items contained in 7? Seeing none, we'll proceed to reports. We have R1, and I'm assuming we will have, I should never assume, sorry, Mr. Limshu joining us.
Good
Remember
afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Limshu. Everybody hear him? Please proceed on R1.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so bear with me for 1 sec. So item R1 relates to application number DVP 20E08. The property is located at 4675 Westwood Road. PID number 029637473. The purpose of the report is to consider an application to vary section 5.2 of CVRD Electoral Area E, zoning bylaw number 1840, to permit a 222.96 square meter accessory building. So as you see on the subject property map before you, this is the subject property here off Westwood Road. This is a Cowichan Valley Highway, just to give you a bit of a reference. The property is actually surrounded by F1 zoning. The surrounding properties are vacant with the exception of the smaller subdivided sites along Westwood. So the parcel in question is this area highlighted in white. As indicated, the applicant is requesting a variance to allow for a larger accessory building on the property. Section 5.2.
Brad, could you move your mic down a little bit?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Okay. Section 5.2E restricts the size of the accessory building to no more than 100 square meters. The applicants are proposing a 222.96 square meter building. So as you see from the aerial photo here, there is an existing building. That existing building is going to be replaced by a newer, larger building. Rather than having multiple buildings on the site, the applicants would like to just have one larger building on the property. As I indicated previously, the surrounding properties on three sides are vacant. These are F1 lands. This is actually the Inwood Creek Park to the east. The closest neighbor is located to the south. And given the proposed location of the accessory building, the building will be located basically as far as you can get from the closest neighbor. Under this zone, the allowable lot coverage is 30%. However, once you add the area of the coverage of the existing house, which is this building here, and the area of the proposed building, the total coverage area is 443.6 square meters. This equates to approximately 4.38% of the overall lot coverage. So given that the proposed building is oversized as per our bylaw, below, given what's permitted under the zoning. With that, I'll open up for questions.
Ms. Legault, is this the one that the applicant is at today?
Yes, the applicant is in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So just for the applicant's benefit, the process will follow here. Staff have now presented the report. I'm sure you've heard most of it or all of it. I will be asking directors if they have any questions for staff. Upon completion of that, we will ask if you have any additional items or information you'd like to provide to the directors, and then directors may have actual questions for you. Upon completion of that, we will entertain a motion, and at that point, your participation will be at a close, and we will consider a motion. So staff directions for staff questions, directors questions for staff, please. Anyone? Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm curious. I know that large accessory buildings are an issue with a lot of communities in our areas. And I was just wondering, when that initial bylaw was accepted by the community in Area E at a smaller size, what was the rationale for that? What were they thinking? And why did they limit it to that size?
Mr. Limshu, you want to take a crack at that one?
Unfortunately, I don't think I can answer that question or do it justice.
Let me give you a hand there, and I'm going to rely on Director Yanni DiNardo for backup because I think we were around when this one was created. This is the RF 5050, Mr. Limshu.
That's correct.
So the idea here was to limit some of the forestry conversion areas and to ensure that the nature of the homes and properties that were developed were akin to perhaps small hobby farms and horses and the like. So it was understood at the time that an accessory building might be a small barn, or it might be a couple 3-car garage for the purposes of those sorts of hobbies. This isn't the first time we've had applications in that area where people are real enthusiasts as to whether it's classic cars or more than a couple of horses, and they've asked for variants to accommodate larger collections or larger interests in areas. So that's what I recall as how we came up with 100 square meters, which is fairly common to other areas, but we have had a number of requests along this line before in that area. Does that sound about right, Director Yanni DiNardo?
Correct.
Thank you. Does that help, Director Acton? Any other questions for staff? I'll go to Director Nicholson first, then Director Smith.
Thank you. I am curious about I think the building is going to be used for building race cars or servicing race cars or something like that. And so I am wondering what environmental protections there are, given that we're close to Inwood Creek, and yeah, those kind of things tend to be potentially messy for the environment.
Mr. Limshu.
Certainly. So this, the applicants have indicated that they do have a hobby where they do race cars, and so they would be subject to. It's not a commercial business per se. It'd be for residential use. So they would be subject to the requirements that any resident would be subject to with respect to making sure that they are cautious with respect to how they deal with potential contaminants such as oils from the vehicles and so forth. It would be no different than you and I changing oil at our house and ensuring that we take the appropriate precautions in doing so.
Anything further, Director Nicholson? Director Smith, question for staff.
My concerns are along the same lines as Director Nicholson with regards to when we change the oil in our cars, we usually have 1 or 2. This sounds like it's going to be more than 1 or 2 vehicles. And the concerns of all the additional storage of parts. Anyhow, I just have concerns about all the oils and the gases involved in something like this type of enterprise.
Thank you, Director.
So is in the building design, is there a opportunity to have an area where those liquids are collected or stored or something like that to ensure? There looks like there's another business, the baby sleep sacks, and there's potential for increased risk of fire with having oils and gases in the area. So I'm just kind of wondering a little bit more about that. Could you clarify that, please?
Mr. Limsher, through to you, please, and I have a comment afterwards.
Sure. The building plans don't specifically identify any special area, if you will, or equipment or anything related to the storage of the oils. I think perhaps the applicant might be able to better clarify as to what the intended use of the space is. The idea is to try to contain all these uses within one building, as opposed to potentially having it spill out throughout the property.
And I would just ask, the nature of this development permit is simply a variance to the building size, correct? Do we have any jurisdiction or ability to influence beyond that, Mr. Limshu?
No, the specifics of the application relate to simply the variance for the building size.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo next, followed by Wilson.
I'll pass, thank you.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The term gearhead in this particular case is not meant to be derogatory. I'm a gearhead, and my experience of people who deal in this kind of activity, such as restoration of old cars, even looking after high performance cars, are normally working in absolutely spotless conditions. There is no other way of working on these things. So I have no worries as to the spillage or anything like that as far as this is concerned. So I'm in favor of granting this. My question to staff would be, is that this is a development variance. If it was denied, then as I understand it, the applicants could just as easily build a second building without having to go for permission at all. This seems to me to be more of a housekeeping thing so that they can have it all together as opposed to going from one to another. Is that correct? And they wouldn't need permission for a second one if they decided to go ahead?
Mr. Limshu?
That's correct. So if they decide to build multiple buildings, 100 square meters or less, they're entitled to do so up to a maximum lot coverage of 30%. They would still require a building permit, but certainly we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, I would like to invite the applicant, who I don't actually see on my screen at this point, but could the applicant, is there anything that you would like to share in addition to what's been presented by staff, or any other comments to the committee members?
Hi there, this is Joanna Schmidt. Sorry we don't have a camera, but we are here. Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Please
great.
proceed.
Okay, so basically, the point being made about containing everything in one unit, obviously it's going to be spotless. We're not going to have any issues of spillage or, or any concerns in that direction, or hazards, any further. Anyways, that's all going to not be an issue. And as well, that we would like to have it all contained in one unit, rather than having multiple buildings on our property, because we do want to keep our property as natural green space. So we just need a little bit more space than what is allotted currently by the size restrictions. And, so that's why we're requesting the variance, just to keep it all in one space and not have to build multiple buildings on the property. And if you have any other questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for your additional comments, and I think that brings some clarity. And I would turn to directors and ask if you have any questions for Ms. Schmidt on the purpose of the variance. I'm not seeing any of my colleagues raising their hands to ask you any questions, so thank you very much, Ms. Schmidt. I will go to the director for the area and ask you what your pleasure is.
I'd like to move the recommendation and speak to it if I have a seconder.
You have a seconder, please proceed.
Thank you. I think if you looked in the attachment that provided the rationale from the applicant, you will see that they say that our area representative indicated that our zoning restrictions were in the process of being modernized and that we should wait for the changes to take place before submitting the application. And last spring, we were in contact with Keith Bathstone, and he again told us to hold on before submitting our permit application to change the size to change the size restrictions of the zoning bylaws. It was scheduled for September 2020. In Area E, we have this inexplicable restriction on accessory building sizes, and it doesn't make any sense. It isn't tied to any environmental issues. It isn't tied to any character, because you can have as many buildings as you want. And many people have found it too restrictive and are waiting patiently. And I am finding it increasingly embarrassing that staff are unable to bring forward the change to the bylaw that's required to make this easy. And instead, what we're seeing is application after application from Area E coming forward, and it takes a lot of staff time to deal with these applications. So I certainly would like to see this one approved, and I would certainly request staff to please get on with the housekeeping that's required to bring this zoning up to date.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. Any further comment on the variance before us? It's been duly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I see none. So I'll call the question. Oh, I'll read the recommendation first. Let's not forget that. That it be recommended to the board that development variance permit number DVP 20E08 for 4675 Westwood Road, PID 029637473 be issued. Call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. That motion carries, and that resolution will go to the board on November the 25th. Next item, R2, report from Development Services for RZ20B01, and I turn to Mr. Limshu. The microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going to share my screen again. Okay, item R2 relates to application number RZ20B01, property located at 2346 Shawnigan Lake Road. This application actually affects two properties, PID numbers 009365842 and 000691500. So the subject map that you see, the subject map that you see before you identifies the two parcels. So parcel number 1, or lot C, is basically this area here, which contains the existing building on the property. Parcel number 2, or lot B, identifies the existing parking area for the site. The purpose of the report is to present an application to amend the Shawnigan Lake zoning bylaw number 985 to permit additional commercial uses at the galley. So the existing building is referred to by locals as the galley. I think that was the name of the restaurant. In addition to so the purpose is to allow for additional commercial uses. In order to accommodate this, the properties will require both an official community plan amendment, as both properties are currently designated rural residential, and they would have to be amended through an OCP amendment from rural residential to commercial. The second bylaw relates to the actual zoning on the property. The property with the actual restaurant building is currently zoned C4, tourist recreational commercial. The adjacent the parking lot is currently zoned R2. The idea would be to rezone both properties to a hybrid of the C4 and the C2 zone to allow for additional commercial uses. So just to be clear, the applicants have indicated that they have no intention of expanding the existing building on the site, but rather would like to see the uses expanded so as to allow for to provide for businesses that are more viable. Under attachment D of the staff report, attachment D basically identifies the uses currently permitted under C4. So these uses include restaurant, golf driving range, tourist accommodation, recreational facilities, accessory retail, and one single family dwelling. Over the years, the second floor of the existing building has been used as a restaurant. However, it's been unsustainable business over time. So you will get a restaurant in there for a season or two. And typically what happens is that business then goes under and the owners are now searching for a new tenant. The idea by expanding the number of commercial uses, the owners are hoping that they would have the ability to get tenants in there that are long-term and economically viable. So if we refer back to attachment D, some of the uses that would be included in addition to the uses permitted under C4 would be marina operations, which includes boat sales, rental, as also the rental of personal watercraft. Retail stores, and I'll get back to that in a second. Offices, catering, personal service establishments, repair of servicing of personal and household goods, veterinary clinic, bed and breakfast accommodation. So under the list of uses, the applicants have indicated that they'd like to keep the existing C4 zoning, in addition to regularizing the personal watercraft aspect of their business, and to include the C2 uses as I've just outlined. At the time of the application, the applicants indicated that there was preliminary interest from a dentist, antique store, and possibly a liquor store. So with respect to a liquor store is considered a retail use. And of the three uses that I just identified, it's felt that liquor store would probably cause the most concern with respect to the community. So in the staff report, we've basically indicated that as part of a licensing, should the owners and the applicants decide to pursue a liquor store, they would have to obtain license from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulations Branch. And they do have their own process with respect to referrals for applications for those kinds of facilities, which includes consultation and permitting from local governments. So there would be a mechanism in place to ensure that there be some community consultation prior to a liquor store going in. Otherwise, if the applicants came forward with any of the other businesses, it would simply be a building permit to renovate the interior. Through discussions with the applicant, they've also indicated that they would be willing to move forward with some cosmetic updates to the existing building. This would include painting, replacing windows, those sorts of things. Again, nothing structural, but simply updating the exterior of the building. Page 4 of the staff report basically provides a summary as to the key points with respect to this application. The galley or the existing building needs to diversify uses on the site to allow for year-round economic activity. There was a riparian report provided, and in that report, it provided some recommendations for improving the surrounding environment along the lake, Shawnigan Lake. The applicants are committed to improving the aesthetics of the existing building should the rezoning proceed. With respect to parking, the combination of both the existing building site and the vacant parking area provides enough parking for the uses that are provided. Having said that, this may change as uses change within the property, and thus as that occurs, we'd have to reevaluate whether or not there's enough parking on the site. Just want to give the committee a heads up that this may lead to a variance depending on what the end uses are with respect to the zone. Having said that, restaurants probably one of the more parking intensive uses that you can have on a property. So if the restaurant uses changes some other use, there's a good chance that the less parking would be required by the building and the tenants. Referring back to page 4 of the staff report, there's a summary table at the bottom that talks about the various issues or identifies the various issues. So I spoke briefly about the riparian protection identified or outlined in the Madrone report, the aesthetics improvements, the consolidation of the two lots. So just to ensure that the parking is tied to the building, staff is recommending that the two lots be consolidated. Spoke briefly about the possibility of a variance being required in the future, depending on the type of uses. And the commitment for community consultation should the applicant pursue a license to establish a liquor store on the premises. Through the discussions with the APC, there was some concern raised with regards to the existing septic system, and they would like to see some assurance that the septic system is capable of accommodating whatever the end uses are on the property. So on the table, it does identify the mechanisms by which we would ensure that those issues are dealt with. So I think with that, I will just open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Limshu, and I gather our applicant has joined the meeting. And just before I go to questions for staff, just to give Mr. Green a lay of the land as to how we'll proceed. The first opportunity is for directors to ask questions of staff of the report that they've just given. Upon completion of that, we will give you an opportunity to share any additional information that you'd like to provide in regards to this. Then I will go to directors for any questions that they may want to pose to you. And on completion of that, we will go to the director and consider a resolution. And at that point, your participation in the process ends, and it'll be on the floor for directors to consider. So with that, I do believe I had my screen just jumped around. I think I had, well, we'll start with Director Smith. Is there anyone else that has questions for staff? Oh, actually it was, can you hang on, Director Smith, Director Yanni DiNardo, Smith, and then Salmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I think through staff, I did go to some of the Shawnigan, it wasn't called charrette, whatever their charrette was called. It had a different name and a really good name. And the community participated a lot in that. And I didn't, was this area important to the community for commercial use? And I remember it as, I'm very familiar with the galley because I was a teenager when I hung around that area. So I'm familiar with the area and the place, but was this important to the community to keep as commercial, or if you can answer that?
Mr. Limshu.
I'm not able to answer that question as I did not participate in that exercise. Just looking at the documents that were produced, it seemed like a lot of discussion focused on the actual village area within Shawnigan. But beyond that, I can't make any additional comments.
Director Yanni Dodaro, would you like Director Acton to take a stab at that since she was front and center on that project?
Yeah, if she could, I'd appreciate it because I just don't recall. I guess, yeah, that would be nice. Thank you.
Director Acton, do you have a comment?
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't part of the charrette per se. The Bev Suderman was also very active in the Think Shawnigan process. And yeah, I don't remember it coming up a lot as a highlight. We started off by asking, you know, what were some of the people's favorite things, and yeah, I just it's not. I think like if that was a zone today, I'm not sure that it would be included in the charrette.
Thank you, Director Acton. Proceed to Director Smith.
Through the chair to staff, I have a couple of questions. It seems like it's in a residential area, and has a traffic study been done to ensure the road looks rather narrow in that area, and adding a group of additional businesses could create issues for the residents. So I was just wondering about a traffic study. And I had another couple of questions that I'm just going to add in there. Has there been any discussion with Island Health regarding the septic system and the proposed zone permitted uses? Because that's always a big issue. What can be permitted under Island Health and a particular septic system? And I'm just wondering about the building and whether there's issues with the building code with regards to that building. So could you just, thank you.
Mr. Limshu, are you able to tackle any of those three questions?
I'll try my best. So with respect to the rezoning application, we did refer to the Ministry of Transportation. I also should mention that we do have Bev Suderman on the call with us as well. She is the planner that actually is stick handling the file. So she might be able to assist me with some of the answers on this, but I do not recall seeing a formal traffic study. Having said that, I do know that the Ministry of Transportation did respond to the referral application. And if I recall correctly, their concern or their comment was that typically they don't like to see parking for businesses out in their road right of way. So if you've been to the property, you'll see that there's parking in front of the existing building, and basically drivers are backing out onto the road right away. Hence the importance of having that neighboring property as part of the development or as part of the overall project to provide parking for the businesses. Bev, did you want to add anything?
So at this point, I'll call on Ms. Suderman to join the WebEx meeting, and you're up in the, wow, you moved. Okay, Ms. Suderman, do you have any way you can enlighten us on the three questions posed by Director Smith?
Yes, to support what Mr. Limchu said, there was no traffic study specifically, but the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure did express concern about the on-street parking. And so this is part of the reason why the rezoning application got expanded from the single parcel, which contained the commercial building only, to include the neighboring parcel, which included the galley parking area, which we hadn't been aware of. So that all has to be regularized. As was said, it appears that a number of the preferred uses may actually result in reduced parking requirements. at least in the summertime. And so we're hoping that that will be reduced. Island Health was a referral agency for the rezoning application. They did not bring back any comments on it. However, I am working with the applicant to get the documentation about the current septic system to make sure that once we have that specific information about the size and the capacity of the septic system and know more about the exact uses that are going to be going in there, that we can take it to Island Health and get some professional advice on that. And lastly, with regard to the building itself, I'm going to ask you to hold that question and ask it again of the applicant at that point in the meeting. But when I did ask whether the building was structurally sound, I was told that the foundations had been updated in recent years.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump in here and ask Ms. Suderman. There was a question posed earlier about the Think Shawnigan project and the whether or not this was part of or a discussion point for this area in the Think Shawnigan project. Can you provide us with any detail or information on that previous question?
Yes, I can try. As Director Acton said, the Galley project is significantly outside of the area that was considered for the Think Shawnigan design project. When we were doing the initial community consultation around what were the highlights and things that people loved about Shawnigan, it did come up as one of those places, but because it was outside of our area for consideration, it didn't really get any kind of follow-up on that.
Thank you very much. I will go to Director Salmon next.
Yeah, thank you. So so a couple of questions. The first one is about the history and heritage. I spent summers on the lake as a child in the 60s, and it was well-established operation then. And I remember my grandfather who came in the 40s saying it was there when he got there, a version of the galley for the speedboat and the restaurant and the marina. So it's a real landmark, and I think there would be a lot of interest. My question is there a heritage, I try to find it on the heritage registry or a candidate for the heritage registry? Anyone?
Mr. Limshu or Ms. Suderman?
I have not seen any reference to that building being a heritage building.
Okay.
So why don't we ask the applicant in the next round if he has any knowledge of that? How's that sound?
Okay, because I think it's at least a candidate, so we'll defer that. Okay. I'm interested if it is what that might mean for the application.
Do you have an additional question?
Yes. Secondly, so just on the public input or the public consultation that's envisioned, would it only be if there's going to be a liquor store there, or would there be some public consultation even without the liquor store?
Mr. Limshu.
Yeah, so as part of the rezoning process, should this application be advanced, there would be a public hearing required for the bylaw amendments. And the bylaws would encompass both the change in the land use designation from rural residential to commercial, as well as the proposed zones, which would include the additional uses. The reason I brought up the liquor store is because of the fact that, between the liquor control and the cannabis regulations branch, they do have their own process as when they do receive applications for liquor stores or the selling of alcohol. And so they have their own process, which the applicant is required to follow, which is outside of the rezoning. But knowing that there would be, there's, potential concern from the community about a liquor store being in the neighborhood, we felt that it was appropriate to raise that point at this point in time so that the committee is aware of that.
Okay. So there would be a public hearing in any case?
There'd be a public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
So I've got myself on the list, and that's actually raised another question for me here along those same lines as Director Salmon had brought up. So firstly, it's my understanding that there's another liquor store in the Shawnigan Village area. Is that the understanding? Either the director or staff might be able to help with that? Okay, so I got a nod from Director Acton and the applicant. So my next question is, and it's around that public process around referrals to us around liquor license amendments and changes and the likes. Is this not the process, and I think Mr. McDonald's probably the person we should have on the line for this one, where we can say that we defer to the liquor control, the new name for them, the Cannabis and Liquor Control Branches process for getting public input, or we can choose to engage in an engagement process as the regional district, but then all of the costs fall to us to do that. Is that not how that procedure works? I'm thinking that's the way it works, but I don't have any staff nodding up and down at me at this point. Is there any staff that can help out with that? Mr. McDonald? Ms. Chirolf in first. Here we go. Ms. Chirolf, can you assist us with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do have a separate application process for liquor license applications. And so there's a fee that's associated with that. And the regional district does have the option to opt out of making comment on liquor license applications. I would suggest that if it's an issue, it should really be addressed in concert with the rezoning application.
Thank you, Ms. Chirolf. I just something twigged that there was that process of opting out or engaging. So with that, I don't see any further. Oh, Ms. Chirolf again. Do you have a question for staff? No, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to inform the committee that the galley is listed as a candidate site for the Community Heritage Register. But I will also remind you that the Community Heritage Register's purpose is for recognition and commemoration of sites as opposed to formal protection.
Thank you, Ms. Chirolf. So seeing no further questions for staff, I will go to the applicant in just a second, but I'd just like to remind directors that in trying to provide a level playing field and fair play for all of us, I'd like to ask you to restrict your questions to one and maybe a second and not have a list so that everybody's got a chance to participate. And I will now go to the applicant and welcome Mr. Green. And is there anything that you'd like to add in addition to the staff report or respond to any of what you've heard so far? And are you prepared to take questions at the end?
We're absolutely prepared to take questions at the end, but I'm happy to kind of go through this bit by bit. First of all, I'm here with my cousin, Will Anderson, who's also advising, and we grew up at Shawnigan Lake all summers, every summers. We got ice cream almost every day at the galley. It was a staple of our lives growing up. We're being part of the community for decades. And the long and the short of it is that I basically was driving by Rich's gas station because Rich is the only gas station. It is the only marina in Shawnigan Lake, right? So it is a hub for everything related to do with the water. And the bottom line is that he has repeatedly had tenants go dark on him, not pay rent, put him in a position where he's been unable to basically, have support for over 3,000 square feet of building for a good chunk of many years of the last 15 years that he's owned it. And even before that, with Pat and Jack were running it as an owner occupier, and they were barely breaking even. So the goal here is to just basically try and broaden the use to try and make it as appealing as possible. Now, we're not locked into a liquor use specifically, and that's why we went for a more general, broader zoning. If we'd gone under I think it's C5, we could have gone under the pub and liquor use. But the bottom line is we want to find the highest and best use for the community as a whole. Now, is the liquor one of the most interested at this time? Absolutely. But we actually want to find the best use possible to maximize the possibility, economic viability. So I want to go kind of director by director through, and I apologize if I don't get your name, but get your Director G and Director A acronym, because that's all I can see here. But Director G, I guess the first question you were asking about was traffic. And so I wanted to be really clear. This is only about 30 or 40 feet off the main road. So literally you make a left or a right-hand turn and you are 30 or 40 feet from the main road that runs around Shawnigan Lake. So while the immediate road that we're directly on is in fact a narrower road, and it used to be the main road back in, God, I think the 40s or 50s, the main road is within just a few feet of it. So traffic isn't going to be an issue. There's not going to be a lot of bypass traffic. It literally, the only properties it exposes are basically the 2 residential properties behind it, one of which is the owner of the galley to begin with. And then from there, this next question you asked about was related to the neighborhood engagement and interest. So we've already had a community engagement meeting with Bev, who facilitated it. It was very helpful. Everyone wants to see this location thrive and try and grow. And in addition to that, we knocked on every single property owner's door in every direction of the property within about 2 properties depth away from it. And we have the support of every single property owner in terms of trying to make this more viable and more beautiful for the community. Lastly, in terms of the road easement for MOT, Bev can vouch for this because we spent a bit of time talking about it while she was on the on-site inspection. That MOT, let's call it easement, effectively is never going to be economically viable or environmentally viable. If they actually took that road space, they'd be building road directly in the registered riparian. In addition to that, they'd be below the 200-year flood line. It would be such a material nightmare for approvals and process. In addition to that, you'd have to buy the better part of 6 residential homes that are below the 200-year flood line past the galley in order to actually have a double lane wide road there. In addition, where the 6 parking stalls are directly where the galley is, it literally leads right into a house. And so you'd have to buy residential lot after residential lot after residential lot all the way along there. And so the likelihood of that ever being activated is extremely lean. And attached to that, for the parking component, we actually took a Google View Street View and flew over every single commercial property in the downtown village. And the vast majority of them aren't conforming to the required bylaw for parking. In fact, over 3/4 of the properties in the village do not comply with the parking requirements at this time under the given uses. So it's a bit unfair to pick out this property in specific in regards to that. For Director Sam, Director A, as to heritage, we did go and speak to the Heritage Society. We got a document that we submitted to Bev and to Frank that did state that there was no formal heritage registration on the property and they had no interest in doing so, at least at the current moment. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have huge emotional significance to the community. I mean, it is a hub. It has been a hub for decades, and we hope to continue to have it be one. And in regards to safety, it is one of the least water accessible properties with a coded locked gate. It has no direct access to water. It is probably one of the least water accessible properties along the waterfront of the entire lake. Yes, if we were only going after a liquor store, we would have gone under a 5 zoning. Instead, we're going for a C2 because we want to see what the highest and best use is. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, Director F. Oh, and lastly, for procedure, yes, we've already spoken to the RCMP because we were going to try and apply for an opportunity to put some sort of commercial use in there this summer under a TUP. And so as a result, we spoke to the RCMP and a couple other groups to try and make sure that it was viable. Unfortunately, because of complications related to the TUP language in the Shawnigan Lake OCP and the fact that the Shawnigan Lake OCP wasn't updated in the latest amendment, the language under TUP language is not legally enforceable. And that's the only reason we're going through this big elaborate process of a full OCP amendment and full rezoning is because we couldn't qualify under a TUP exemption. Please let me know if you have any other questions, and I'd be happy to help however I can.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I have Director Yanni DiNardo first up. Anybody else? I've got Director Salmon as well and Nicholson. Go ahead, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Green. I was just broadening the uses. What is considered a personal watercraft?
Mr. Green.
Well, Bev and I walked through this. So specifically, anything related to any boat below a certain length that's rented out qualifies as a personal watercraft. And so as a result, we wanted to make sure that we could continue to service the community and make sure that the community had the ability, because they've been operating boat rentals and equipment rentals and things like that out of this location for over 50 years. And so it was more a matter of just making sure that we brought it into compliance with what the bylaw is relative to what it's been doing for forever.
So that's, excuse me, Mr. Chair, if I can just
Go ahead.
Clarify. Does that mean those Sea-Doo things, those little?
They've been renting Sea-Doos out of that location for, I think, the better part of 30 years.
Does that conclude your question? Thank you. Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. So I was right on the same thing. But so, you know, the jet skis are popular with some, but they're also quite controversial. A lot of people consider them a nuisance and a danger with the speed they go. So is that just, is your intention, is that a core function of what you're going to do? Is it a deal breaker if you weren't able to do that anymore? Or what are your thoughts?
Honestly, the tenant that's been there forever, we hope to continue to have him there. He has had minimal complaints and minimal accidents and minimal issues over the years. He's got a long-standing track record in the community, and he's let's put it this way: when I was 5 years old, I was renting jet skis from him with my dad, and my riding on the back with my dad. So I mean, that business has been there forever.
Follow
up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I realize that there was also a fatality not too many years ago. So I know that community-wise, there may be some maybe divided opinions on that. But thank you.
Thank you, Director Salmon. Director Nicholson, you're next.
Thank you. I was glad to hear that you had done some consultation with the community. I am wondering if you have gone and talked to the school, which I don't know what the current name of it is, but I know that it was the old Shawnigan Light Girls School many years ago when my mother went. And also there's the Lions Easter Seal Camp not too far. And I'm just thinking about the issue of retail and potential for liquor or cannabis there, and how these two institutional property owners would feel about that.
Mr. Green.
To be honest with you, and I think Bev was actually quite surprised with this when she came onto the property as well. There is a number of properties between us and the school right at the gate. But in addition to that, as you go further down, Easter Seal is a long way down the road. It's not anywhere near the galley from a geographic perspective. From a liquor perspective, obviously whoever holds that license, and it would be a third-party license if we did it, this would be a group who, the group who's interested already has a number of licenses, has been operating licenses all over the province, has a long track record. One of the gentlemen, Larry, and the developer who owns the license combined, they've I think got 7 or 8 locations currently operating in full compliance across the entire province. There's no way they would allow anything inappropriate to happen around that if that winds up being the tenant that we decide to go with.
Follow up, Director Nicholson.
So my question was whether you had actually consulted with those two institutions.
The school, we have not. I know that we've talked to a number of the neighbors who are very unhappy about the school's application rezoning, but no, we haven't spoken to the school yet. As to the Easter Seal, it wasn't even open this summer, so I don't know how we'd be able to get a hold of them. I'd be happy to follow up and try and reach out to them.
Thank you. Director Salmon, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Just on you mentioned pub. I know that you had the licensed restaurant there for many years. Is pub as opposed to a liquor store something you would consider, or what are the pros and cons?
So under a specific pub zoning, you're limited to only that use, which is why we decided to go with C2. But ultimately, yes, it has been serving liquor to patrons for a long time. They had kegs, they had liquor by the bottle. They had a whole series of cocktails that we're providing for decades. So there's a long history of liquor on this premises with never an incident. In the 15 years that the owner has been there, there's yet to be a liquor-related incident of any kind.
Does that conclude your question, Director Salmon? So I will once again survey the directors. Are there any further questions for the applicant? I see no further question. Oh, Director Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. I believe that Ms. Suderman indicated that I had asked a question about the building code, and she indicated that you'd most likely be able to answer that question.
Perhaps repeat the question for the applicant.
I was just wondering if the building meets the building code and is up to code.
Mr. Green, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm just speaking to the owner. I wanted to verify the dollar sum that he spent on the foundation. Rich, what did he spend on the foundation?
Yeah, it was probably about $15,000 to $20,000 by the time it's all cleared.
So there was an engineering team that went into $15,000 to $20,000 in the foundation work in the last couple of years. They also updated the gas tank around that time as well, which is in full compliance.
Does that satisfy your question, Director Smith?
Yes. Can I have an additional question, please?
Please proceed.
So do you also sell fuel on site for the boats, and is there a special license required for selling that type of fuel?
So under the C4 zoning, there is marked gas effectively that is sold. It's a pump. It's been there again forever. It's the only pump on the whole lake. This is one of only 2 commercially zoned properties that directly front onto the lake. And basically, yeah, they've been operating forever there. As to whether it's under the marina zoning that they're allowed to operate on that basis. Rich, is there any additional licensing you require, periodic inspections or anything like that?
No.
Does that conclude your question, Director Smith? Thank you. So I'm just looking to directors if there are any further questions for the applicant before we proceed to considering a resolution. I see none. Thank you, Mr. Green, for joining us today. You can hang on while we do the deliberations if you'd like. And with that, I will turn to the director for the area. And what's your pleasure, Ms. Acton?
Well, thank you first to the committee. All your questions were really thoughtful. Knocking on people's doors, I wouldn't exactly call that community consultation. Of course, the neighbors in the area would love to see that property fixed up. It is in large need of some refurbishing. Right now, we're in the process. We're in a transition period with our HOCP, and I think it is a good opportunity for the community to highlight how we see ourselves going. So I would, based on the merits of this application, I would move number 3. I do not believe that the community supports this vision.
So we have a number 3 moved. I'm just going to try and locate it in the package, which is, I think, right down at the end. I do believe we have a seconder, so let me find it. Option number 3. It's been moved and seconded that it be recommended to the board that development application number RZ20B01 be denied. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the matter. Could I have Director Acton to speak first, followed by Director Smith?
And 1 or 2, I think, would just delay the process. This application does not highlight where the community sees itself going. We just went through a large amount of community consultation. And yes, the history is important, but would those uses remain? Not necessarily. So I think it's a good opportunity we do value the galley, but how can we see it moving forward? And would hope that during the HOCP, there would be that opportunity for the community to speak on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Acton. Director Smith.
I support this motion. I think that what's really important is we're moving forward with our MOCP and our rezoning, or our zoning, and we need to support that process. And items like this need to move through that process. It needs to be a whole community consultation, not just a small pocket of people. So I do agree with what Director Acton is saying. It's a good opportunity. We need to be having things looked at by the whole community, and I support her.
Okay, I've got two more speakers. I'll go to Director Wilson. I think I saw his hand first, followed by Director Salmon. Director Wilson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I won't be supporting this this particular one. To me, we need to support the businesses which are going through such a tough time at the moment. We know that a lot of people are going to go out of business because, and I do understand fully the some of the concerns that have been expressed by directors as far as alcohol and that kind of thing is concerned. But I do also believe that the applicants have done everything they can in order to try and survive in these tough times. So I can't support this particular motion, and I apologize for that.
Thank you, Director Wilson, Director Salmon, and Yanni DiNardo. Director Salmon, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I also agree with the others, and but I do applaud the effort to do something with the property, and I just think there's more work to be done. And even when the school being a couple hundred feet away, and they want to sort of consult with them, the high school. It's been a great location over many years, and I'm sure we can get something happening there. But for now, I agree with the other directors. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have Director Yanni DiNardo to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also agree that we should look at the broader picture and community consultation, which that would happen with the HOCPs and the other. I just think that it needs to be looked at in all the context and not to put anybody out of business, because this has potential, but what is that potential? And it's a broader community conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. Seeing no other hands in the air, and I will read the resolution one more time so that everyone's clear. It is that it be recommended to the board that development application number RZ20B01 be denied. I will now call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Director Kuhn, Director Wilson, opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Green, for your participation. It is now 2:44, and this room that I'm in is freezing cold, so I'm going to suggest we break for 10 minutes and see you back, or 11 minutes, see you back here at 2:55. Please remember to turn off your mics and your video streaming.
Cameras live.
Thank you, Ms. Lagoan. I'd like to welcome everybody back from our short recess, and we'll now proceed to the next item on the agenda, which, according to my agenda here, is R3. It's a report from the Inspections and Enforcement Division regarding October 2020 building report. We have Mr. McDonald on the screen with us. This is a for information item. Mr. McDonald, do you have anything you'd like to present to us today, or are you just here for answering questions?
I have no presentation, just here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Are there any questions of this report for Mr. McDonald? Seeing no hands in the air. Oh, Director Acton, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if you're seeing any effects from COVID right now. anything affecting your team.
Through you, Mr. Chair, do you have anything more specific? Or are you thinking just building numbers or inspections?
Yeah, like the numbers or inspections, or are you feel have things changed now because people are feeling more comfortable, or what's like the general feel out there? Is there anxiety when the building inspector shows up? Is there like, how's operations going with COVID? Like, is there something you want to share about around?
Are you picking up on any new trends or anxieties or anything along those lines?
Through you, Mr. Chair, probably with some initial anxiety, but we've really worked it all out. And even we've seen there was a slight slowdown in permit applications, but shortly after there was people still wanting to build. So really, no, I would have to say that we've actually managed to work most things out. The last piece that we have that we're trying to do is it's an occupied building. So we're currently working with WCB and staff to figure out a way that we could actually now do inspections of buildings that are occupied.
Excellent. Director Kuhn.
In area I, we love COVID. We've got the highest dollar number this year so far.
Well, that's an excellent observation, and I'm going to make one of my own. If you take note in the building inspection report, Area F got skunked in every category for this reporting period. And I actually do have a purpose in bringing that up. You would have noted in some of our HOCP and MOCP documentation that we've reviewed over the past while that there has been reference to a, well, previously they called it a glut, but lack of need for new residential developments in electoral area F. And just in the short few years since Laketown Ranch has gone in, I don't believe there's a vacant single-family building lot left in all of electoral area F, and it's reflected in here. No new housing starts, no nothing. So there's a report coming on a little later on in the agenda that may shed some light on that and bring some hope to the community for some new revenues on the building inspection side. So with that, any other questions for staff on this report? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Are you the one up for the next report as well? That's turn to R4. Mr. McDonald.
There's a report in front of you. There is no presentation and it's for information only. And I'm here just to answer any questions.
Director Yanni DiNardo, then Acton. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I don't think you're last, Mr. Chair, in this. You know, you're kind of middle of the road with 6 on this one. But my question is the seeing that the fireworks, it's noticeable to see that was an issue probably everywhere. But the waste management, there is complaints. What exactly would the waste management complaints be?
Mr. McDonald.
I may have to call on other staff who wrote this report to elaborate more on that. And I believe that person is here if you would like me to get that person into the room.
Would you please do that?
If I could, Mr. Chair, while he's out of the room, just make a comment. Today happens to be garbage day in Area D in my area. And I sure notice, I don't know what we're going to do, but the garbage and recycling that's in there looks really suspect. So I'm curious. That may be a whole other story, but that was just what I noted today.
I don't believe we've had people out auditing our curbside for some time, and I do know it's an issue on a regular basis when they get those bins dumped in the transfer station, that there's an awful lot of stuff that goes into recycling bins that ought not to be in there. It looks like Mr. Morano has joined us on that question that Director Yanni DiNardo had put. So could you repeat your question for, was it Director Yanni DiNardo for
yes,
staff? Yes.
Yeah, it was for staff. I'm waste management. So, in complaints on waste management, what would that be, roughly?
Mr. Morano.
Waste management is mainly concerned with burning and dumping, mainly.
Thank you.
Director Acton.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions. One is, I recently got a complaint from someone. This would be a question, I think, for Mr. McDonald, but and they're concerned about property not having proper building permits and tenants and like a whole bunch of issues. And they're being refused any action because they're nervous for their own safety and they do not want to give their name. Could you expand as to why we would not answer their questions or proceed and offer any kind of resolution?
Before you answer, Mr. McDonald, so just so that we're going to keep this where it should be, you're asking of a very general nature and not something that might go into legal and enforcement and closed, correct, Director Acton? Just wanting to be clear.
Yeah, no,
okay, of a very general nature. Okay, thank you.
They were told that they had to submit their name. And so is that a policy of ours or is that a procedure bylaw? Where's that information?
Mr. McDonald.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have a policy and we generally don't act on anonymous calls. The information is kept private, but we do like to have their information in case we end up in court.
Do you have a follow-up, Director Acton?
So yes, so you said we like to have it, but do we have to have it?
Mr. McDonald.
Our policy does say that we require that information, but it is kept, like as I said, we do keep that information under privacy.
Or it would also fall under the Freedom of Information Act if they did give their name.
Mr. McDonald?
When they do the Freedom of Information, that information is blacked out. It would only come up if it goes to court.
And if I could just follow up on this, I think there might be a bit of a scale as to how staff respond to this. Like if there's an imminent health and safety concern that has to be addressed, I'm sure our staff are going to go out there. But if somebody says that they think their neighbor's fence is going to be 6 inches too tall, it may not require the same sort of immediate response. So is that a fair assessment, Mr. McDonald?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
All right, is there any other questions?
I had another comment about the soil bylaw. Should I wait my turn again?
Why don't you, well, I don't see any other hands in regard. We'll go to Director Salmon first.
Yeah, thank you. So just on the table of complaints, OCP, development permit areas is a column. So could you, what's an example of what kind of complaint that would be? I see we have 2 of them here in area A. So,
Mr. McDonald or Mr. Morano?
Mr. Chair, that is mainly concerned with riparian areas. To the best of my knowledge, on occasion we get some slope stability development permit areas, but mainly it's riparian areas.
okay, thank you.
Director Acton, you're up.
Thank you. So first I have a question. The soil permits that are listed of collecting $100,000 in third quarter, that chart of properties, are those new permits or are those just existing ones?
Those are all existing ones. We have no more new ones. This is just all a report from the third quarter.
Okay. And I did notice that it predominantly all in Area B and Mill Bay. I'm pleased to see that the soil bylaw is collecting so much money, but my understanding is that it goes into the function for only that purpose. And I think it's really important for us to be being a little more proactive. I would like to propose to the committee that we create a motion that would, or to direct staff to create a water, how did I word it? A water sampling program, a regular water sampling program that would include testing for pollutants and dissolved solids, and with suggested sites, and for staff to suggest sites where the water quality testing would be conducted, but to also include McGee Creek. That one is crucial for connecting to all the other water sources. And I think if we have some we should be starting to collect proper data so that if and when we have a proper, a really strong soil bylaw, we'll have some data to help us protect our water sources. Shawnigan Lake is increasingly getting more and more nutrients in the lake, and it's causing so many other issues that we can't mitigate. It's becoming just a lost cause for us. So I think we could be proactive on this, and we have the money for it in the function.
So before I go to Ms. Terrell, who I'm sure has some help, assistance and direction on this, there's a number of things that come to light in that, fees and taxes that are raised for a specific function must stay contained within that. And to broaden the scope of that, this just screams that we need a staff report and direction to provide us some ability to be able to respond to the concerns that Director Acton has raised. So there, I can think of 2 or 3 that we would need some clarification on. So at this point, those were comments and not a motion yet.
Well, the motion would be.
Well, can you hang on?
The motion would be a staff report. But sure.
Hang on, let's hear from Ms. Terrell first, because I think there's already a soil deposit bylaw review being contemplated. So Ms. Terrell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was just going to say for the committee's benefit that we could take that information under advisement and incorporate it into our bylaw enforcement review and specific review of the soil regulations. Some of those issues may be more appropriately dealt with through another CVRD function, and it may be possible to incorporate some of that into the permitting process, but that'll have to be, vetted through our legal counsel.
That's precisely what I thought might need to happen. So are you comfortable with the direction to staff from what you've heard? And is there anybody on the committee that disagrees with that approach, that staff look at that from the perspective of the review, and whether or not there might be other functions that would be appropriate for the administration of that? I don't see anybody saying no. Well, okay, I've got Director Salmon, then Nicholson.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying no, I'm agreeing. I was just wondering about timing. When can we expect that review?
Ms. Terrell?
I believe that we've sort of identified that as part of the 2021 budget package going forward for board consideration. If the committee wanted to consider earlier direction and confirmation of budget and recommendation to the board, we could proceed earlier. But I believe some work has been done already in terms of discussion with legal counsel, which Mr. McDonald will be able to add more to.
Follow up.
Follow up, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think earlier would be wise, just given the amount of feedback we're getting about the runoff into the lake and elsewhere, and just given that if we're generating $400,000 a year from soil permits, we might want to think of how to best use it. So if we could do that earlier, if the committee.
So thank you, Director Salmon. I think it's a good suggestion, and I think this might be something that staff can bring forward to our December 2nd meeting, because it sounds like there's budget implications in this. We can't take from one pocket and put in another. So I think they're clearly hearing from us that we think that there's some areas that can be tackled here. Director Nicholson next.
My question was answered. I really think we need to get on with this.
Thank you. Director Acton.
Well, it was to, what I heard Ms. Sherolf say is that if we were to give direction now, that it would be coming before 2021. I was not under the impression that we were waiting until next year, until budget. I thought this report was coming back as soon as possible. Is there not any money in the function right now that we could make a budget amendment for most of this work to be done before the end of the year?
So I'll take this initially because I don't believe this was in the initial work plan that was proposed. And yeah, I see Director Kuhn there, but it wasn't in the work plan for 2020. And when it was proposed a few months ago that a review of the soil deposit bylaw happened, that was taken into the work planning and budgeting for 2021. I may be mistaken on that, but that was my understanding, and that's what Ms. Sherolf has just explained, and Mr. McDonald is nodding as well, and I see Mr. Carruthers has joined us, so can you bring some clarity to this, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make the committee aware that there is another jurisdiction that has a significant role in this, and that's the Ministry of Environment. Any enforcement or monitoring for contamination into the environment is certainly a provincial jurisdiction, not ours. So I'm going to suggest that any work that the committee wants staff to do, we would heavily involve the Ministry of Environment in that, particularly if it's towards some kind of enforcement action. I can certainly understand how it would help to inform our soil bylaw. However, I don't believe, and I don't have the bylaw in front of me, but I don't believe that the bylaw contemplated the CBRD taking on monitoring action. That's typically something that either the province or local government will put on the applicant to take that on, similar to what we do with our waste stream management licensing bylaw. So I say that just to say there's a lot of information that needs to come to the committee before you make a decision on how to move forward on this. A lot of complexity and jurisdictional issues.
So that's exactly what I was feeling, and we're way down a rabbit hole that we started on a report for information on from the enforcement division. So I think staff know what we're looking for. Yeah, I'm seeing nodding. So without trying to create a resolution that's going to do that, we're going to be discussing this in 2 weeks as budget implications for next year. So Director Kuhn.
Yes, I think we should wait until the land use department has done their study. I can't see coming up with a different resolution in the meantime. We're just kind of getting things all mixed up. This is in the works. Let's wait till it comes out.
So we've heard from our colleagues. I'll go back to Director Acton, who initiated some of this discussion. Are you comfortable with the status quo where we're at, or do you want to propose something different?
Well, so does that mean that so on December 2nd, we're going to see a number, but where's a report that says, this is what's going to, will we see what that number entails and what kind of direction it's taking?
I turn to staff. I believe we've already given direction to review the soil deposit bylaw, correct, Ms. Sherolf or Mr. McDonald? So yes, that has already been given.
But now you're saying that's not till 2021. So what's going to come forward is a number for a budget, but will we see will it be explained what that number is going to execute on December 2nd?
So once again, I'm seeing layers of complexity that Mr. Carruthers has explained, is that you've asked at the beginning of this conversation that monies from the permit fees from the soil deposit function might be considered for testing and monitoring, which Mr. Crothers has just explained to us isn't an appropriate thing for us to be doing within that function and might lay in the jurisdiction of another area. So I'm sort of begging the indulgence of the committee to not be asking for specifics around, they've heard us and they're going to come back with a report, and likely this work is going to be contemplated for 2021.
Okay,
There's only 6 weeks left in 2020. So
can I repeat my question then?
Sure.
Okay. So, okay, I get that perhaps I would actually like to see proof. I would like to ask the lawyer between now and December 2nd if it's something we could use, but on a different topic, when December 2nd comes, and let's just say for even numbers, we're told that for $100,000, we'll have a nice rounded soil bylaw review. Are we going to be given more information than just that? Or is it going to contain what kind of some more detail around the bylaw, around the review?
Ms. Sherrill.
Yeah, I think for the committee's information, staff would come back to you with a proposed work plan in terms of how we would go about undertaking the review. There are a lot of different pieces to it. So we're not just looking at the soil bylaw, but other aspects of bylaw enforcement. And so we would come back to you with a process and how we would go about conducting that review.
Thank you. And for the other question of checking with legal, so I think we should be really definite that and know, can we spend some of that money on some water quality testing, because this would be off of the property of the applicants and leaving it. The community does not trust applicants to take care of their own testing.
So Director Acton, I think those are questions that go beyond the scope of this report here. And I think our staff have tried to provide us with some direction that's probably beyond the scope of what we're discussing here. I see you, Director Wilson. Mr. Crothers, can you help us find a way out of this? Because I think we're asking for more things than a simple review of the soil deposit bylaw can provide us.
Yeah, and I think we're getting to the solution rather than dealing with what the problem is and the question is. And I think what Director Acton is getting at is that she would like to know what the options are for enhancing the water quality monitoring associated with those dump sites. And I think that's a question that the staff can probe into in terms of looking at what are the powers within the existing service to do that? What are the appropriate jurisdictions to be doing that? Is it something we would partner on with the Ministry of Environment? There's a whole layer of complexity around this, and I think we should ask the question and have staff come back and discuss what some of the options might be for the committee to consider to deal with that particular issue rather than jump into a solution immediately. And we can do that so I think what Ms. Charles and I can do is make a commitment that as part of the review of the soil bylaw, one of the aspects of that review could be what additional measures might be taken or could be considered in terms of long-term monitoring. And that could be amendments to the bylaw that would require the applicants to absorb that cost. The basic principle is that the polluter pays. And so for the taxpayers to be paying, it should really be the person that's presenting that risk to the environment that should actually be covering the cost of that monitoring. But we're getting into fine detail. I think we understand what Director Acton's looking for, and I think Ms. Charlton and I can address that through the review. What I'm going to say is we can't deal with it immediately. I wouldn't suggest that you go ahead and start a water monitoring program immediately. There's a lot of work that has to go into that to make sure that it's done properly and appropriately.
Director Wilson, hang on. Come on. Let's Director Acton. I have to give others the floor to speak their minds. So, Director Wilson, please.
Thank you. Just to Director Acton, welcome to my world. You're going down a road that you will not get out of, and this is going to be pushing it from one place to another. And I know the staff are doing everything that they can, but good luck with that one.
Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. Just a more general budget question on the soil bylaw. So what does happen if the revenues continue to significantly exceed what we're spending and we can't spend it anywhere else? What's the limit?
That might be a finance question. Does either Mr. Elf or Mr. Carruthers, or do we have Ms. Weiner? Good timing. Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. Through the chair to Director Salmon. If there's revenue over the expenses, that's when you would be looking at putting those money and funds into an operating reserve. And then there is a policy, which is the operating reserve policy, that outlines moving forward. If it was not going to be utilized for anything down the road further, the board could consider reducing requisition.
Or fees.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So I've actually got Director Acton, Director Wilson. Director Acton, I would go to you to close, but I will go to Director Wilson now. Director Wilson, please. No?
Sorry, I thought you were going to Director Acton first there. No, one thing that I will say is polluter pays. I think it's a great thing. But I would hope that any bylaw which is brought forward has some teeth, so we don't sit back saying, you've got to pay in there, cocking their snoot out, saying, I don't think so, take me to court. So whatever we do, let's make sure it has some teeth and we can actually get the polluters to pay. Thank you.
Director Acton, to close on this item.
I just wanted to have clarity, or if staff's not certain, with the extra funds, how can we spend them? So speaking to legal and to Director Wilson's point of, can we reserve them for that, for court cases? What can we use that money for and use it properly and not have the taxpayer? I'm not suggesting the taxpayer pay at all. I'm suggesting that the fees pay for any kind of water quality testing.
I think that that's a question that we can come back to you with more clarity, because there's a lot of tentacles on that one that will need to be addressed. So that report was for information, and it was a very intense discussion. And I'm going to suggest we proceed to the next, which is R5. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, and all your support team. R5 is a report from the Water Management Division, and we have our smiling Mr. Dennis on the far right-hand corner of my screen. And does this require some explanation?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be pleased to do that. This report concerns the Cobble Hill Sewer System in Electoral Area C, and it's an amendment bylaw to the existing management bylaw. And it's to adjust the capacity fee rates. So the Cobble Hill Sewer System has plenty of capacity to provide additional services in the community to support connections for things like failed on-site systems that people may want to connect for new development or secondary suite development within the existing area. Our existing capacity fee for a single residential family or single family residence is $13,500. We've now done some pre-design work for future upgrades to the system. And based on that, we have determined that our capacity fee can be reduced to $7,000 per unit. And that with the additional capacity we have available to us, that would accumulate sufficient funds to carry out the upgrade in future to add further capacity again. So that way it can kind of pay it forward and the system can carry on. Also, we, as we have done in other areas, propose to adjust our capacity fee for secondary suites to reduce that to $2,000 with a consideration for affordable housing. And also in general, we find that if the capacity charge is too high, there's a tendency for people to go illegal with their secondary suites. So this way it's more acceptable and approachable for people to proceed with, and we support affordable housing. So those are our recommendations in the amendment bylaw, Mr. Chairman.
Turn to the director for the area, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've had some very fruitful discussions with Mr. Dennison and his staff, and we've gone a long way towards doing some really good stuff down there. So thank you to Mr. Dennison for that. Who also, I'm told, has one of those, what do you call them over here, shifter spanners in his back pocket all the time. Just a couple of questions there, and this is I know the answer to this, but to anyone who's listening in on this, just so that they got the thing. Thanks for the information about reducing this to 7,000. First of all, I understand that is a one-time connection fee only. Is that correct?
That's correct. We call it a capacity fee, and it's kind of our equivalent to a DCC. So the idea is that so the new connectee will use up some of the capacity in the system. And if we set aside this money into a reserve, then by the time all the capacity is used up, the available capacity, and the treatment works will have the funds in place to carry out the necessary next upgrade. We've actually even costed out. We've done the pre-design work, and we have an estimate from our consultants as to how much money we'll need for that. So that determines the $7,000 fee.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And the user fees then after that would be $250 per year with no other additional fees involved once you're connected. Is that correct?
No other fees. There is the parcel tax.
Parcel tax, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And if nobody else has anything, I would move the recommendation in the staff report.
And we have a seconder in Director Yanni DiNardo, and the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that CBRD bylaw number 4354, Cobble Hill Village Sewer System Management Amendment Bylaw 2020, that's one of the long ones, that be considered for 3 readings and adoption. It's been duly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. The motion carries. Mr. Dennison, we're on R6. Are you taking that one?
I am indeed, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
This report concerns the Missachi Lake Sewer System in Electoral Area F. The Pebbles West development in Honeymoon Bay is required under its zoning to have CVRD sewer and water servicing. It's written into the zoning definition. So it made good sense to us for the sewer service to be part of the Missachi Lake sewer system, which we of course have recently reworked as far as the disposal system for us. We've built our force main going to new lands in Honeymoon Bay that we've acquired through a rezoning. And the idea here is that Pebbles West would be part of that, hopefully the first wave in Honeymoon Bay or near that. So they would be able to discharge their effluent to the disposal field in Honeymoon Bay. So as part of that, they need to join the Missachi Lake service area. Right now, we still have the terminology of the Missachi Lake sewer system service area. We do hope to bring forward an amended bylaw in future to change that name to South Shore sewer system to reflect the fact that servicing would be in Missachi Lake and Honeymoon Bay. As part of the works for the Pebbles West development, they've contributed already to a larger force main going from South Shore Road up to the disposal area, and in future we'll be building a pump station there, and also be contributing hopefully to a phase 2 upgrade on the treatment works as well. So there's more down the road on that.
Thank you, Mr. Dennison. I would ask if there's any questions or a mover for the recommendation. Is that what you're recommending, Director Yanni DiNardo? Moved and seconded. And was that a second, Director Smith? That was a question. Can I have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Director Salmon, and I'll go to I'll just read the resolution first, and I'll go to Director Smith for questions. The resolution is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that certificate of sufficiency confirming that a sufficient petition requesting inclusion to the Missachi Lake sewer service area be received. 2, that CVRD bylaw number 15, Missachi Lake sewer service area. Boy, that's an old one, eh? Establishment bylaw 1969 be amended to include the property described as PID 030-783-712, Lot A, the rest of the legal. And 3, that the amendment to bylaw 15 be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption. So that's the resolution. I will speak to it in a moment, but I'll give Director Smith the first crack at it.
Thank you. I remember that Missachi Lake sewer received a $1.2 million grant for the sewer system. I think was that in 2017, and here we are in 2020, and they don't have their system yet, and yet they're adding to that system. Are these people at Pebbles West also receiving a portion based on the grant? Is there some sort of mixture in there financially for assistance with the Missachi sewer system and that grant that was originally for Missachi?
Mr. Dennison, I know you've got this one, so please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No. So the Pebbles West development had to pay the incremental cost. They actually more than paid the incremental cost for the force main that they would be making use of. All the rest of the force main from Missachi, they make no use of at all. And then in addition to that, they have to provide all of the additional disposal capacity in the field. They will be making no use of the disposal capacity that's been paid for by the grant or the residual in the customers of Missachi Lake. In addition to that, as I say, in future, there'll be contributions for pump station that will also benefit the rest of the community, and contributions for their fair share anyway for treatment. So it's all, they have the only advantage, in an indirect sense is just the scale. So because the system exists here and they're adding their incremental costs to it, it works. It's a win-win for both sides. But otherwise, there's no direct subsidy at all of their costs.
So I'll just conclude by one remark, and this, well, maybe a couple of remarks, but I can't smile big enough to celebrate this. And the work's been done, the check's been cashed, the force main has been expanded, and this is I guess almost the second step towards having the entire communities of Missachi Lake and Honeymoon Bay one day on a sewer line, and having their liquid waste taken away from the shoreline and the waterfront and properly disposed of away from the water. And I didn't think I'd see this in my lifetime, let alone in the time that I served. So I would ask everyone to please support this simple inclusion into the service area, and then great things still yet to come. So with that, I see no other hands. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you very much for your explanation, Mr. Dennison. That's R6. I believe we get Ms. Chirelf next for R7. And this is an information item as well. Ms. Chirelf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a presentation. I believe it will be between 10 and 15 minutes in length, and I just wanted to confirm that that would be okay with the committee. If it's too long, I can go quickly.
Well, I could ask if we're going to be 10 or 15, and I think we'll want to crack right on into the unfinished business item as well. Do you want to take 5 minutes, just 5 or 10 minutes now? And then I see lots of nodding around the room. So it's 3:37. See you be back here at 3:45. We'll give you 8 minutes. Okay. Cheers. Turn off your mic and your camera.
And I will go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Camera's buffering, so just hold tight.
You gotta wait.
Okay.
Camera's live.
Welcome back, everyone. We are now on item R7, a report from Ms. Chirelf.
Okay. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So just briefly, I'll give you an outline about what I'll talk about. So we'll talk about the review process, the outcomes in terms of challenges and opportunities, recommendations, and then management service enhancement plan for 2020 21 through 22. So our process started last fall following direction of the board to conduct a service review. That began with Urban Systems undertaking some background research. They held a workshop with a number of CBRD staff from Land Use Services and other departments. They also had one-on-one interviews with a number of staff to gain further information. In January, they went out and had interviews with representatives of the development community and prepared a summary report for staff in February 2020. There was a presentation subsequently to the electoral area directors. And then the consultant work really wrapped up in March. And so now that the board has adopted its strategic plan, we've come back with a proposed service enhancement plan, which addresses the recommendations of the consultant's report, but also addresses directions that are coming from the board. So as was alluded to earlier, there was a provincial process that was undertaken in 2019, which was called the Development Approvals Process Review. So this document's available on the Province of BC website. I included the website address there for anyone who wants to look it up. And I think there's also a link in the report. But essentially what it found was that the challenges that are being faced by the CBRD are not unlike challenges that are faced by local governments across the province. And so things like incomplete or poor quality submissions by applicants, complex requirements, inconsistent development guidelines, contradictory advice from different staff, lengthy processes, lack of transparency for applicants and the public, and then lack of consistency with adjacent local governments. Those are things that are commonly experienced. It's not just us. So that made us feel a bit better. We weren't alone. There were also opportunities that were identified through the provincial process that were very similar to ours. And that included having better quality control at the application submission stage. And that really ties to, what are our official community plan and zoning bylaw regulations, and what does our procedures bylaw call for, and what are the requirements at the application stage. So then we want to also look at aligning our approval processes with the type of application. So we don't have necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with a simple rezoning application, which might be as simple as a text amendment versus one that might be super complex and have widespread impacts. Implementing a digital development tracking system was something that was identified as important across the province, and it was important for the CBRD as well. We have been using, I'm probably starting to sound like a broken record, but the same systems that have been used for several years, and they're really not sufficient. So, we'd love to be able to provide better reporting to you on a regular basis, and have essentially the information at our fingertips, so we can run reports quickly, so that we can, provide the public and applicants with the information that they're looking for in terms of what's happening in their neighborhoods, for instance. The province wanted to look at, developing a model procedures bylaw and best practices guides and checklists for local governments. Our consultant also looked at the need to create a procedures bylaw for the CBRD, or an updated one. And then better communication with both internally and externally. So communicating better with other CBRD staff and departments, and also communicating better with our communities, with our commissions, and with our applicants. So the consultant came up with sort of 5 themes to categorize the recommendations, and I'll go through these for you. So under the theme of administrative tools and staff resources, Again, implementing a land management system that would tie basically any kind of application information to our CBRD geographic information system. Would help us to increase our transparency, streamline our processes, increase our reporting capability, and also reduce error. There was an interest or need to increase our staff's technical capacity, and that might be everything from using external consultants when appropriate, to drawing on the expertise of other departments or staff, or providing specialized training to our staff in particular areas. And that might be something like riparian areas regulation, or riparian areas protection regulations, or hazardous slope management. Commonly, there were lots of comments about the professional reliance model and how that's used at the CBRD, and where are the opportunities to use it in a smarter way. So, for instance, we can't necessarily outright reject some of the information that we get that we might not sort of like, but we can certainly ask for it in a consistent format. So here's the CBRD's template for RAR reports, and that's what we would ask them to provide. Another recommendation was recruiting additional senior level staff. And so this is kind of a point in time. This was earlier last year. You obviously know that we hired a manager of development services in 2019, which has been really well received, and we're really happy to have Mr. Limshu with us. We are also in the process of recruiting a planning coordinator, which will be within the community planning division, but also provide a liaison to development services, and play a wide, kind of a broad role, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then another sort of outcome, which is interesting, which wasn't really directly related to development services, but more broadly to the Land Use Services Department, was looking at our administrative staff and how they support the various divisions. And there's been, hasn't really been a lot of focus on that in the past. And so I, as a separate process, have been undertaking an administrative support staff review, and that will likely result in some changes to roles and responsibilities in conjunction with staff and our union. So under the theme of culture and people, there was a sort of a recommendation around the CBRD's organizational culture, and not to say it's bad. I think we have a good organizational culture, but again, to continue to foster interdepartmental dialogue and collaboration, providing opportunities for professional development and training. Most of our planners are actually members of the Canadian Institute of Planning, and full members are required to undertake a minimum amount of professional development annually. So we do that, we budget for that. So it's just to continue to support that in a way that's going to support the CBRD as well. And then internal staff mobility. So then looking at, how can staff sort of grow within the roles that they have and potentially move up or move around the organization where there are opportunities to do so. Customer service was a huge focus. So, it was recognized that we need to remember that we're here to serve the public, and we need to remember that that's our primary objective, and we need to work on customer service. So when we think about the work that we do, how are we serving the public and how can we improve? And then again, communication, again, internally and externally with the public, with applicants, with external agencies, and with First Nations as well. Under the theme of internal policies and procedures, there's a need to review our application processes. There's a recommendation to increase delegation for technical matters to streamline application processes for applications particularly that are not discretionary in nature. To update the development procedures bylaw, and I won't get into that, but that's going to be fodder for some really good conversation in an upcoming meeting. Once that's done, there'll be a need to update the development handbook, then associated application forms, application checklists. The consultants were really happy to report that pre-application meetings have been really successful, and our internal development review team meetings have been successful, and we should continue doing that. And then lastly, standard operating procedures. So that's basically having a really good documentation about what we do. And if we are to implement a land management system, we need to know exactly what we do in every step of every process. And so this will help us with onboarding and recruiting of new staff in the future. We have some of this, but it's not really properly consolidated in one location. So it's internal stuff, but good for you to know. Under regulations, continue to harmonize our OCP and zoning bylaws. So having one set of policies, one set of zoning regulations is going to go a long way to simplifying processes for both staff in terms of how they review applications, but also for applicants in understanding what the various regulations are. Subdivision was an interesting topic of conversation, and of course the CBRD has previously attempted to get greater authority around subdivision approval, which has been met with a bit of resistance, but there are certainly some things we can do to update our subdivision regulations, and you should be seeing a report coming forward shortly around that topic as well. And then thinking about the future and how we could harmonize our regulations with adjacent local governments, obviously the biggest one being North Cowichan. So one of the kind of key pieces of information that was provided by developers was that, they go to North Cowichan, who has one set of rules, and then they come to the CBRD, who has another, and it's challenging to have different frameworks to have to work within. So if we can get to a point in the future where we could have some consistency, it would make everyone's lives potentially easier. And then maybe most importantly, public process. So looking at our public hearings, ensuring that they're efficient, and ensuring that people can have the information that they need in order to provide informed input. So considering community information meetings in advance for maybe some of the more complex applications. Looking at our advisory planning commissions, so having them focus on policy matters and discretionary applications, and perhaps not so much on technical matters where there isn't really a lot of room for public input. And then also providing greater staff support and interpretation of regulations for those more complicated applications. At some point in the future, with harmonization, the committee is going to have to discuss, the number of commissions that you have and how you deal with proposed OCP amendments when you have multiple independent commissions. I don't think we're quite at that stage, but I just want you to kind of think about that for the future. And then lastly, the idea of a technical advisory panel came up. So, and this isn't, I don't believe this is another commission, but a group of volunteers that would be a sounding board on the technical aspects of applications. So you could have volunteers with expertise in, say, engineering or architecture, landscape architecture, biology, ecology, geoscience, etc. And so that was the sort of, I called this a plan, but I mean, plan is a bit of a stretch. It's a really high level sort of outline of what we are suggesting will be done over the next 2 years. And if there are any questions about this, I can provide greater detail, but I didn't want to speak too much about it. I will say that there is a lot of work to be done around the administrative bylaws, and I often think they're like the poor stepsister to the OCP and the zoning bylaws, because they don't really get a lot of attention. And those are your development procedures bylaw and your board of variance bylaw and your APC bylaw and your development approval information bylaw. They're really important bylaws, and they really set the framework or the foundation for how information gets processed. So I think they're of equal importance to your OCP and your zoning bylaws. So those are kind of two key pieces, and you'll be seeing more. I've been working with Coralie in community planning, and we'll be bringing a lot of a lot of information to the committee in the near future. But I was just as a sort of in summary, I was quite happy with the outcomes of the urban systems review. I would have liked to have seen more metrics, but as I noted earlier, it's really challenging without the tools to be able to measure what we're doing, the length of time it takes to process applications, for instance. So ideally, we get to a point in the future where we're able to do that. And then I did include a organizational structure chart just so you could see where we're at right now. So we have, this is pretty much everything under function 325 community planning, which is separated into two divisions, community planning and development services. So you can see on the left-hand side there, this is Mr. Tippett's group, where we have Coralie Breen, our planning coordinator, who's working primarily on the HOCP project and MOCP, and Ms. Dixon, who's recently moved over from development services. We have a planning coordinator position that we're recruiting for, and I see this as a really important position, as I noted before, in terms of being a person who can do more of the day-to-day work that happens within community planning. So sometimes you think of long-range planning as really long-range planning, but there's a lot of day-to-day work that goes on there as well. Regularly dealing with referrals, regularly liaising with agencies and First Nations. Would like to see a lot more community outreach. You know, we often hear that, you know, our APCs feel somewhat disconnected. We haven't gotten back to them. So just more regular linkages with those groups. And then on the development, I'll note there as well, we're showing a vacant planner position within community planning. I recommended in my plan that we sort of move forward with some of the proposed changes and then evaluate what our staffing needs are next fall. We may have a better idea then. There were some recommendations around, increased technical expertise in staff or more senior level staff. So it's really hard to know right now without doing some of the work we need to do to streamline our operations. And we do have on the development services side under Mr. Limshu's group, one planner who's still on leave and should be coming back in the spring. And then we have an admin person who's also currently on leave. And I'm happy to report that we just hired a planner one in the development services group, and that's Ms. Rashenda Woods, who is our successful internal candidate. She's moving over from our GIS division. So that is it in a nutshell. I will be happy to take questions if there are any. Or I can move back through to the chart if there are specific questions about the chart, but I perhaps should stop sharing so that the chair can see the folks.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
And there's nothing about that being in a nutshell because that was a lot of information to digest. So I saw Director Wilson and Director Yanni DiNardo. Keep in mind for everyone, this is for information. And I would even suggest that maybe a more fulsome discussion at a future meeting might be a good idea. Some of this will be coming forward at the December 2nd budget meeting. So with that, I've got Director Wilson, Yanni DiNardo, and Acton. So Director Wilson, the floor is yours, or the mic's yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Anne. That was very good. I appreciate that. And one of the points that you brought up there was front and center every time, which is the contradictory advice from different departments. I've heard this over and over again, and I'm glad you brought that one up. I'm assuming then that the position of planning coordinator that you were talking about is meant to address that particular part, or is that just a part of whatever that person would be doing? And I do have a couple of follow-up, if that's all right.
Ms. Chiralf, and we'll give you one follow-up and maybe put you on the list for the third. How's that sound? Ms. Chiralf.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I'm certainly hoping that our new planning coordinator will be providing a liaison between planning and other departments within the CVRD. But one of the challenges we have is that we're dealing with some regulations that need to be updated. So there's a to a certain extent lack of clarity in some of our guidelines and regulations, and with our harmonized OCP process, we're going to get more clarity. So these things will work together, and ideally it'll be, all good in the end.
That's good. Thank you very much,
Director Wilson.
Yeah, and you made reference to the recruitment of additional senior level staff. How senior?
Ms. Trill?
Yeah, and so I'd be happy to. I just wanted to add that I would be happy to meet with the ESC in closed sessions to talk about specific staff-related issues. But one of the sort of outcomes of the report was that, it noted that with some staff turnover, there's been a bit of a loss of institutional knowledge, right? And so we're in the process of again. We have obviously I mentioned Mr. Limshu, and so that's been great. And recruitment of a planning coordinator will have additional senior staff capacity. We have staff, I should say, that have quite a bit of experience, right? But what we've sort of lost is some of that institutional knowledge that I'm not sure. Well, maybe we never get it back, or we just have to build it up again, right? So like I noted, it was a point in time, and now we're quite a few months down the road, and I'm fairly optimistic about the direction that we're heading in.
Okay, that's good. And if you could put me back on the list, please, Mr. Chair, just a couple of other points to bring up.
I would, and just beg your indulgence, and just to repeat for everyone, we've got a long list, and the general best practice is to pose a question, seek a clarification, and make a comment, and then I can put you back on the list. So thank you for that, Director Wilson. Currently, I have Dr. Yanni DiNardo, then Acton next. So Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Ms. Chair-Off. It's more of what a very good report. Thank you so much. And it was good timing as well. But the opportunities for the professional reliance model, that was something that I hadn't heard before. So I'm really happy to see that, because that's been a huge challenge as long as I have been a director. And also the opportunities for training. There's a lot of benefits in that. I know that UBCM and AVICC are kind of like basic. They always are very valuable to us as directors, and in the past, planners used to come. So just those two comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was nice to see that the APCs were mentioned there, and interesting that you've also included an advisory, I forget what you called it, professional advisory committee. I would just really caution that to make sure that they really have value, because there's a lot of feeling behind some of the volunteering, especially like the APCs. They don't feel like they add any value when there's not when they don't hear back what happened, or if their comments are not taken, they feel like their comments aren't valued. But what I wanted to ask you was, because of COVID, and I think this is a really big opportunity for us to have better community engagement when it comes to rezoning and public hearings. And we certainly could improve immensely on the technology. I just did a IAP2 course last week, and the technology that just through Zoom, that they were able to implement different chat rooms, different ways to communicate. It was really engaging. And I think we should really be looking at how we can do that, and then make sure that we're not leaving the seniors behind as well. So not that all seniors aren't technical. You know what I mean? Nobody's left, no man behind, whether younger or older. But I think that's a big opportunity for us, and we could really set the stage of what's expected, and doing the minimum, I think, is not enough. So I would, it would be great to see more of that.
Thank you, Director Acton. Director Nicholson next.
Thank you for the report. This is definitely a #1 priority for me because it's our basic business. We've had challenges from the get-go since I became a director. And I think our goal really here is about making good decisions for the community, for their best interests, for safety reasons, for environmental health, for amenity services, and so forth. And I have, I went through your report and I read the development approvals process review pretty quickly, again, for a second time. And it all reminded me, the report in particular, reminded me of concerns that I had with the review when it was done and the gaps in the findings. And I've kind of gone through on the 4 different pieces that you've got in your report. And I know that the chair will not be happy if I go through it all at one time, in one go. So I'm just going to segue from Director Acton's comment about the community and people making people thing and talk about 2 things right now. One is culture and people, and the other topic is public input. And I would say first, as an overarching statement, I don't see the connection necessarily with your enhancement plan with the points that were made under the 4 topics. And so it would be helpful if you're going to be using this as an ongoing way of bringing back information to be more clear about how the enhancement plan addresses the issues. So on the issue of Chair, would you mind putting your microphone up? Thank you. So about culture and people, the central to this, and I think you understand this, Ms. Chair, it's who are we serving? And in my mind, it's the community first and the people who bring in applications second. And so it does speak directly to the need to improve public communications and the public input processes. We need timely and meaningful community input. And that speaks to the public input process itself. And we had I think an unfortunate public hearing a couple of weeks ago where some elderly people did not understand the application, don't have computers at home. It's COVID, they have difficulty accessing information, yet we did not provide it sort of an explanation about what the application was all about and allow them to ask questions. And I thought that was very not friendly and helpful to the community who we're here to serve. So that's something, a small example of something that I think we need to rethink. We definitely need to streamline it so the public have input earlier in the process. It makes so much sense. We always have these last minute, the community figures out something's happening and we get all this stuff at the last minute and it's not helpful for making a good decision. On the issue of the advisory planning commissions, we really need to provide good support for them every time they meet because they are very valuable. I have an excellent advisory planning commission that provides good technical expertise as well as good knowledge of the community and the territory that they're providing advice on. So we need to move slowly and figuring if we're evolving into a different model, we need to go slowly about that. But the most important thing is we shouldn't go ahead with any changes at all on the public communications input process without meaningful discussion with the advisory planning commissions and with the directors. And if I recall when this review happened, the directors were not consulted, were not part of the data collection that the consultant carried out. And neither were the advisory planning commissions. That's a huge gap in this report. And I think that we really need to move forward and correct that. I'll leave it there and put me back on the list, please.
And thank you for stopping there, Director Nicholson. And I kind of alluded to the fact that this is a fairly in-depth report that's going to require a fair bit of discussion, and we can go through this from now until we're all fully satisfied and made all the comments that we want. I might suggest that now that we have this before us and have seen it and have read it, that we might actually want to continue this at another meeting. So I just put that out there for discussion. I've got a number of people left on the list, and I will put Director Nicholson back on. So contemplate that and what your thoughts are, because I've got a number of questions about things that have been raised as well. I will go to Director Salmon next.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I've got a couple, but I'll follow Chair's request and do one at a time. So the general, I don't like to be critical, but I sort of question the overall value of this. I mean, I remember when we okayed it, I think Director Kuhn asked him it was going to cost $30,000. Don't know what it came in at, but then in reading it, it's so general, and in fact, it's quite similar to the province's procedures review that is also referenced. And I don't know, I'll just take one example. I like professional reliance, which we've known has been a big problem for years with the shopping and the substandard reports. And yet I see our review here recommends that we do another review of professional reliance. So my question is, could we not just implement something on professional reliance? And you mentioned the template, but maybe also an approved list of professionals, try some specific thing to address this issue, and not just kick it down the road and review it again.
Mr. Rolfe, on that specific topic.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I noted it's a very high level plan. It's intended to be primarily for internal use and provide a guide for us to do further work. Yeah, there were a lot of similarities between the DAPR that the province did and the findings that the consultants came to. However, there were a lot of things that were specific to the CVRD that were unique to the CVRD as a result of the review, and some of those things were related to the interconnectedness of our staff relationships, the things that I really can't, or wouldn't report to you in an open meeting, but we could discuss further in closed, because it speaks to staff relations. And I think that's where a lot of the value lies. And also for me, just generally this is like a very big, complex knot. You were talking about knots earlier. So this is like a 5th degree knot, right? That it's sort of like pulling apart all of the pieces and figuring out, how do we move forward, and understanding what are the different areas that we need to work on. And so yes, professional reliance is one of them, and not sort of suggesting that we're gonna go to the province and say we want to get rid of professional reliance. I think it's kind of, we have to sort of live with that, but it's like, how do we work with it? What can we do at the CVRD that will enable us to work better under a professional reliance model? And so, for instance, if we're dealing with the RAPR, the province has different powers than we do, but if we work well with the province, then we can deal with, inadequate reports in a better way, right? If we're dealing with geotechnical reports, if we have one template, then we review them in the same way each time, as opposed to looking at a variety of different types and formats of reports. So that's kind of what I'm suggesting we want to look at.
Follow-up.
Before I go to you for a follow-up, I can tell you that I was in attendance at a UBCM committee meeting, and the notion of a stable or approved list of qualified environmental professionals is definitely on the table, but has to be very delicately handled in how we implement it. So I will be talking about moving forward in that direction. I think that will help us a lot, knowing that we've got a system for dealing with that will provide all of us with the comfort of the quality of the material that's coming in the door. So I just wanted to bring that. That was news from this morning, sort of thing. So Director Salmon, follow up.
Thank you. good to know. It's such a, I mean, the province did a huge review in professional reliance, came out a couple of years ago, 121 implementations, 2 of them implemented. So, you know, we really have to, I'm encouraged if true list as possible, maybe something about arm's length independence required. You know, if we could do some specifics and not just review it again, I think we'd be better served.
Thank you, Director Salmon. I've got Director Smith next and followed by Wilson.
Thank you for the report. I agree with the other directors that there's quite a few gaps here that we need to have a look at. Our bylaws updated. Those are all important things. If we don't have the tools to sit at this table to actually make the good decisions that Director Nicholson spoke about, we need those tools. And it's year 2020 and we may be in COVID, but our technology should be at the up to date, and we shouldn't be having to circle around and make decisions that are based on old documents. We need to move this along and get going. One of the things I did hear you say, you talked about communication with many different areas. The one thing I didn't hear was communications with the director of the area. You know, as directors, we receive only of the area, we only receive the information on the Friday prior to the meeting agenda. That leaves us out of the loop. It puts us in a very awkward position. And I think that communication with the directors is one of the things that should be a priority as we move forward so that we have a good understanding and that if there's things that are in our areas that we can help staff we're the boots on the ground in our communities. We know our communities. We know just about every inch of our communities. So I think those are important things also. So I'd like to see way more communication with the area director so that we don't get caught at these meetings looking like we're way out of date and out of place. Thank you.
Ms. Churrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of points. So as I said before, I think we're going to have, you're going to have a good discussion when they come forward with draft development procedures bylaw, and accompanying that will be a draft policy document for processing applications. And so, for example, one of the things that I'm looking at is, can we have an earlier check-in with the director for the area on a development variance permit application, for instance, to say, hey, is this one that you want to refer to your advisory planning commission, or could it go straight to the EASC? We don't do that right now. So we want to see that sort of level of early interaction. So you do know that something's coming forward and you're aware of it. The other thing I was going to note is that, yeah, we need to kind of move ahead with technology. I could do it right now if I shared my screen, but if you have time, go to the Columbia-Shuswap Regional District's website. They have in their planning section under current applications, you can navigate in there and you can select by electoral area the applications that are sort of current for that particular area, and drill down and find information where they're located and what the nature of the application is. And that's part of my sort of continued rant and push for land management system, is to be able to improve the amount of information that we're getting out to the public and to directors.
Thank you. I will go to Director Wilson, Nicholson, and Yanni DiNardo. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's I do really like what I'm hearing here, not just from the planning department, but also from the other directors. And I'm sure that Mr. Alpha is taking copious notes. And thank you for that. And you are doing. You're fighting against the tide, but I know you're winning there. One of the things that I truly believe in, it was part of my career mobility or upward mobility, call it what you like, it is this internal staff mobility That's an absolute necessity, not just because the professional bodies say you have to do it, but purely from the point of view of seeing what others do. And I would really like to see that spread throughout the organisation, not just in planning as well. But and the final one is the consider harmonisation with the neighbouring local governments. That's going to be a toughie, but the sooner we can move on that, the better. That would be really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wilson. I will go to Director Nicholson next, followed by Yanni DiNardo, and then I think I've got a closing comment afterwards. So Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So I agree with the last 2 points from Director Smith and Director Wilson for sure. And right now I'd like to just focus on the other major gap that I see relating to administrative tools and internal policy and procedures issue. So I agree the land use software is going to make it much easier to track things. What I have noticed over the past 6 years at the CVOD is that there is no feedback loop to the regulations. So no matter how good your application process and all that is, we still end up making not good decisions because when things aren't working, either big things or small things, they are never fixed in a timely way. So that is something that we can fix if we think about all the information you need to put together to do that. And so I'm wondering, this SOP manual, what was the SOP stand for?
Ms. Terrell, Standard Operating Procedure.
Yeah. So you said that this had to be done in order to implement the land management software properly, which I agree, and you have to know what you're doing and all the different stuff. So I don't understand why we're not doing that right away. Like, why aren't we working on that and getting it done in land management software? And just, again, I'm going to come back to this issue that I'm having a really hard time looking at your enhancement plan and correlating it with the issues. I think it would be really helpful if we could clarify a lot of that, because I think timing is of the essence on a lot of it. We see empty boxes without staff in them right now, and I just really really want this to be fast tracked, basically, and I want us to do a good job. And so, yeah, I think we need to have more discussion along those lines.
Excellent points. Ms. Terrell, do you want to tackle some of that?
We're doing the best we can.
Fair enough. And I think I may have an area we can go after we hear from Director Yanni DiNardo, and then I'll be closing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Chair, I'm thinking that maybe what direction you might be thinking in about is also what I think that this should go to another meeting. I'm not sure what you're going to do, but I really want to echo the gaps. And I thank Director Nicholson for that we were not consulted. Our APCs and Parks Commissions over and over again, we as directors have how important they are to us. And so hearing that there needs to be more support for the APCs is really valuable too. So that gap, I hope that we can deal with that somehow too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. So what I'm going to suggest is that this has been very constructive, and I hope Ms. Charalf has gained a lot from listening to what seems to be the issues rising to the top here. And I'm going to look to staff for some assistance in this, because I believe that there's more opportunity for discussion of some of the things that have been raised in open session at a perhaps a subsequent meeting, or maybe our next regular meeting. I do also think there might be some opportunities around a closed session discussion around staffing and that sort of thing as well. So I don't know whether this would fall to to Ms. Legault or to Mr. Carruthers as to when we could have a discussion of this nature. Now, generally when we discuss staff, it's done at a board level, but this is specific to electoral area services. So I put that out there saying that, yes, we need to talk more. yes, we should talk more soon, because even as Director Nicholson has described, that this is a priority, that we can have some of these things implemented so we can move quickly on them. So I see Mr. Carruthers has popped up. I would like to have more discussion and open on some of these things, and tackle some of those other discussions in close. So Mr. Carruthers, any comment?
Yeah, I would suggest that maybe your next step would be to closed session and have that conversation about the staffing, so we can close the loop on that piece first, and then we would be in a good position to understand what you wanted to cover again in an open session. But I think the next step, would be to go to closed and have that staffing discussion, and we can do that at your next meeting, and at that point we can discuss with the committee when you'd like to look at the rest of it in open.
So thank you for that. So I'm just going to look to committee and say that we have a meeting. We've got a budget meeting to decide a number of things on the morning of December the 2nd. I would strongly suggest that closed session, does it have to happen at the board, Mr. Carruthers, or can it happen in closed at EAS?
You know, I think it's very specific to electoral area services, and I don't think it would be a concern to have that discussion at the committee level. It doesn't have to go to the board.
So thank you for that. So I'm going to recommend that that the afternoon of the 2nd at our regular next EAS meeting, and I don't even know if I'll be sitting in the chair, but I recommend that be brought forward to the next closed as a topic of discussion. So I don't know if we need a resolution to that effect, or whether staff can just take that and add it to the agenda. So I'm seeing nodding for resolution or nodding for no, we don't need a resolution. So that's pretty clear. I think there's been some very good discussion around this. Director Yanni DiNardo, did you have an extra? No, you don't have an additional comment. So anything final to this, or are we comfortable with the next steps to go forward? Director Smith.
Would it be beneficial for us to have a workshop as directors to go over a little bit more of this and have more discussion with staff?
Well, I right now I see a little bit of nodding no, but I would say let's leave that as an open for a possibility. Should we have the closed session discussion and additional discussion on the 2nd, if it's the will of the committee to move to a workshop, a morning workshop, then let's leave that on the table. But for right now, I think we've got a plan of action for 2 weeks from now. So I see some general nodding around the table. So that will conclude this item, which is R7. Thank you very much, Ms. Chirolf. And we now go to number 9, which is unfinished business. And there is a verbal report and a recommendation from the Manager of Parks and Trails Division. So who will be presenting for that item?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Farquhar.
So good afternoon, committee. So yeah, this report brought forward from the October 21st committee meeting is with respect to the Thetis Island Community Wharf projected options and costs for options for dealing with conditional assessments have been done by the marine engineering consulting firm. As a bit of a verbal update, as noted in the report, of immediate action that was noted in the report was closure of the pier to vehicles due to the condition of the pier, and that action was taken towards the end of October. And as a result of that action, some issues and some concerns arose with respect to first responders on Thetis through the Thetis Island Improvement District, who provide for the fire service in regards to medical evacuations and challenges that they were experiencing because they were no longer able to get their ambulance down the length of the wharf to transport patients down the ramp for transport off the island during times ferries were not running. So through Director Smith and the CAO, a meeting was organized with representatives from the Thetis Island Improvement District, the Thetis Island Ratepayer Association, and from the Port Commission to hear the concerns and see what possible options to deal with the concerns being raised about their inability to get vehicles down, even in emergency circumstances. The outcome of that discussion was a clear understanding of the concerns that they've raised and a commitment to see what possible interim options might be possible to help improve or facilitate their moving of patients during medical emergencies off the island by way of the wharf, understanding that it still remains closed to vehicles. So we've been looking at some options, nothing to report as of yet to the committee. However, there was also discussion about bringing this report back to the committee and bringing the recommendation as well to also look to move forward with respect to the options outlined by the engineer in terms of seeking ultimately direction of the committee and the board after review with the Port Commission, a strategy forward in terms of dealing with the current condition of the wharf and looking at what should be done to undertake upgrades. So, Mr. Chair, the report is before the committee again. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer the best I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. And I will go to Director Smith first off. And we have a recommendation before you. And Director Smith came to me before the meeting and had some concerns that she would like to express. And we discussed the fact that a number of them are fairly specifically operational in nature. But I think in due respect, that Director Smith should have an opportunity to express some of those. But perhaps we can deal with the resolution that is before us and any questions that might go to Mr. Farquhar, and I'll go to Director Smith first.
Thank you. I appreciate the meeting with Brian Crothers and Brian Farquhar, the commission, the Port Commission, and the others that attended the meeting. It was really a good meeting, and I think that there was a lot of good discussion there. Since that meeting, I have had a phone call from the Improvement District that is also responsible for the first responders. Thetis Island is very unique. None of you have islands, so living on an island, when you have an emergency and the first responders arrive, they have what's called a rescue vehicle, and the rescue vehicle transports the patient to the pier. And now that they are unable to access the pier, they've come across some extremely complicated situations. The main one, there's a couple of them, and one is lighting. How in the dark do you transport a patient along? If you look at the photo of the wharf, the trestle, it's a long wharf. So they have removed items, lights from a fire truck, and tried to move them down the pier or down the wharf as they've moved the patient to assist the paramedics. There needs to be some form of lighting. They have come up with an option of using LED with batteries that would be portable, and they would be able to light the trestle. And they have come up with a good solution to solve that one. Another thing that is the decking on the trestle is planking, and taking a gurney across planking is not a smooth transition for the patient. And this needs to be addressed quickly, very quickly. So those are two items that need to be addressed, not today, but tomorrow. They need to be put in place. They've already had emergencies that they've had to work through, and it becomes a very complicated process for the patient, for the paramedics, and then also they're concerned about the snow removal. In the past, the snow removal was done by Cape and Ray as a courtesy, where they just brought their tractor over, ran down the wharf, and removed the snow. So now they're sitting with not only freezing rain possibilities and snow possibilities, they need some form of meshing to do the smooth transportation of the patient, but also sorting out how the snow removal is going to take place and how the freezing. So they have quite a few public safety concerns right now, and I'm sure that Mr. Farquhar will be addressing those most likely putting some action in place starting tomorrow. Waiting for the next meeting isn't going to solve these public safety issues. So now that I've had my say and I know how concerned we are about public safety, and this is a CVRD asset, and as an asset that assists approximately 350 permanent residents, and then right now there's a lot more residents on the island, so we need to make sure we move along with their public safety. So I would like to move the resolution that is in the meeting, that it be recommended to the board that the Thetis Island Community Wharf options and cost projections marine engineering report prepared by Herald Engineering Services be referred to the Thetis Island Port Commission.
And that's been seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any further discussion on that resolution? Director Salmon.
Well, just curious, so it's referred to them, but what's the purpose of that? Like, is it to determine who pays for it or what?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, the Port Commission is in place by the CVRD board. And so we're wanting to get some input feedback from the Port Commission in terms of what the engineers have assessed in terms of the options. And that will help inform the committee and the board in terms of budget priorities for 2021 and an action plan. So all that would be brought back to this committee and ultimately the board for an implementation.
That's good explanation. There's some significant hurdles in front of that group, and I think that this is a good first step. And any further questions or any follow up from you, Director Salmon? Okay, so I will look to call the question. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you, Director Smith, and we will now proceed to no new business. We have question period, and I would turn to Ms. Legault and ask her if there are any questions submitted by the public for the chair that I might answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are a couple of them in the inbox here. The first one is from Bernard Eurlink. Dear Chair, will the CVRD involve the public in the review of the soil deposit bylaw?
At this point, I would suggest that that we haven't had a plan put forward yet for the review, and I think that our senior staff and our general manager have heard that heard loud and clear that that's something that's desired. And I would suggest that if there's going to be any significant changes to a bylaw, that there would likely have to be a hearing of some sort. So I would short answer. Yes. At what stage and at what level, we don't know yet, and I expect a full plan as to how that's going to be carried out will be brought to committee. Next, Ms. Legault.
The next submission is from Cliff Evans. Mr. Chair, a couple of days ago, a turbidity reading of the water leaching into a drainage ditch which drains directly into Shawnigan Creek 50 meters from the West Shawnigan Lake Road Bridge had a reading of 92.5 NTU. The safe drinking water level is 1 NTU. This has been reported to RAP twice to the ALC bylaw officer and the CVRD bylaw officer. Nothing has been done. Don't you think if we want action, we have to help ourselves now, not after the fact? Shouldn't the CVRD take action to notify VHA? Do the citizens always have to be the people that report contamination offenses?
Well, that's a very challenging question, and I think I heard one of our directors say earlier in today's meeting that we are the boots on the ground, and we rely really heavily on our community members. And given that we're dealing with cost pressures and the likes, we certainly appreciate all of the community members that are on the ground reporting things. But we do work on a complaint basis system with our staff. And I know that many of us would like to have our enforcement personnel in our communities, maybe not 24/7, but a lot more than they are. There are cost pressures and requirements on them that we don't discuss the operational aspects of what they do, but I think they're trying their best given the resources that they have. And it should also be noted that there are other communities, like I know I have reported dust and silt on roadways around our community. Director Kuhn has seen it as well, where we get trucks come onto our roads, the rains come, the rain washes the roads into the ditch, and I wouldn't even know what the NTU rating would be, but our ditch water can turn chocolate brown, and it's up to anyone that sees it to report it to the appropriate authorities, and the RAP line is a great place to start. Any further questions, Ms. Legault?
The next submission is from Susan Kaufman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. On R1 DVP, there's two questions to this on two separate items. On R1 DVP for accessory building, to Director Nicholson's point of updating the bylaw, the Area E APC OCP Review Committee has had extensive discussions on the need to look at the current accessory building size. Could staff refer back to or inquire about those discussions that were not only limited to physical size of the building, but also included the lot coverage and building clustering? Ideally, would it be possible for staff to consult with the APC?
I think this is a question that all of us are asking about the individualizing of specific problems that we want to address in our area, and the moving forward of the harmonized OCP, the modernized OCP, and the accompanying bylaws. And yes, we can stop to look at individual specific things. As a matter of fact, during a break, I was talking with staff about the fact that we've got some inconsistencies in our bylaws that we want to fix. But what we've come to realize is that if we stop to fix this one, then someone else is going to want to have their one fix in their area completed, when I think there's a general feeling of a will to move forward so that we can have that consolidation, harmonization, and that we're all working from the same playbook. So yes, is it possible that we can refer off and attempt these individual fixes? I think it's possible, but I don't know that that's the will of the committee today. You had a second question.
This is on R7, also from Susan Kaufman. I wish to thank Ms. Churl for her presentation. It was helpful and provided a good opportunity to identify key areas of concern. Technology upgrades are paramount for information management and website capabilities and content. Could the APCs and the public have an opportunity for consultation? Given the amount of interest in the topics discussed, would the EASC consider bringing this back to a special EASC meeting?
That's a question for the committee as a whole, and not just simply for the chair. And as I say, I may not be sitting in the chair 2 weeks from now. So, it's a fair question. I think in general, we want to hear from community members and the likes, but then there are issues that have to be decided upon by the elected officials at the table or on the screen. And I think that upgrades in technologies and the like are definitely demonstrated to be important decisions that need to be made. But there are people on this screen right now that are concerned about the impacts to taxpayers as well. So it's a balancing act that, yes, we like to hear input from our community members, but we also have taxation and bottom lines to consider as well. So I would be more than willing, if I'm sitting in the chair, or perhaps another director can raise it at the next meeting, as to whether or not the APC wants to hold a special meeting on the upgrades of our technology and our systems. Does that conclude the questions?
That concludes question period.
That concludes question period. So with that, I see it brings us to closed session as 12, in which we have none. And just prior to adjourning, I want to thank everyone for your cooperation and participation over the past year. We've had some interesting times, and we've had some long meetings, and we've got some work done. And I want to thank you all for the hard work that you've done. We've done a lot of reading and a lot of discussing. And with that, I just want to Thank you for the opportunity to serve. And now I would take a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded all around the room. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.